Hey guys, welcome to episode 4 of Church Launch Podcast. Yes, we've been at it about a month now. You can see behind me, I got a little bit going on, putting up some whiteboards. You're going to be able to hopefully organize my life a little better and wrap my mind around what it is I'm doing and how I'm structuring my time. So that'll be there. Lots of ideas, lots of things. Maybe I'll draw some pretty pictures for you guys down the road. But for today, it is a work in progress. So it's Monday, January 9th, and we have Pastor Jordan Hardison on the podcast. Pastor Jordan is at Redefine Church down in sunny Florida. And we talk a little bit about his calling, about the process, about how he came to start Redefine Church, what led up to that, and also his other endeavors, and the fact that he is bivocational and his wife does work, and just kind of talking through that and some of the challenges and some of the rewards and just the mindset in general of being bivocational when you plant your church. So I encourage you, take a few minutes, write things down. And as always, in the show notes, you'll find contact information, Instagrams, websites, all the good stuff. So, if you have anything, any questions, comments, feel free to leave that below, or head to the Discord. I'm still pushing the Discord. No one's using the Discord, but I do believe that in time that can become a community. And if it's not Discord, maybe organically, we're able to start this community in the comments on YouTube or head over to Facebook. I don't know. We'll see where it ends up. But for now, I'm pushing the Discord, but I'm not going to die by that sword. Here's Pastor Jordan Hardison. Thank you guys for coming along for another week. Well, welcome to Church Launch Podcast. This is episode 4 at the time of airing. So today we had Pastor Jordan Hardison with Redefine Church down in Fort Pierce, Florida. Did I get that right?
That's right. Yeah, church is in Port St. Lucie. I'm in Fort Pierce. It's right in the same spot. We're close.
Florida, sunny Florida, nonetheless.
That's right. Yes.
Well, Pastor Jordan, thank you for joining us. I know it's with the sunshine and everything else. Being on the beach is probably always the temptation, but taking a few minutes to put a shirt back on and spend some time with us on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time. And it's nice outside today. I decided to sit outside today. So,
is it always beach weather?
It is almost always beach weather. We had the coldest Christmas this year, and it's so funny because down in Florida, we're always praying for a cold Christmas. We're like, everything else around Christmas, no thank you. But actual Christmas Day, I think we were like in the 30s, which is the coldest it's been in probably years down here. So no beach weather on Christmas Day, but the day after Christmas, it was back to beach weather again. So
it's like in North Carolina, we hope for snow on Christmas, which never happens. This year we got like 10-degree weather. And it's like, well, close, but not quite.
yeah.
But
See,
I
cold
guess,
and no snow is just not fun. At least if it snows, you can do something. But
right.
This is coming from somebody who's lived in Florida my whole life, so I don't know how difficult snow is to deal with, but it sounds cool.
Well, on Christmas everything's shut down anyway, so it's like it may as well snow and give us something pretty to look at.
True, yeah.
Um, so tell us a little bit about Redefine Church. Tell us what's going on down there.
Yeah, so man, there's quite a story, but I just realized yesterday was our 2-year anniversary of launching online. So we did we had a Bible study going, and there's some story leading up to that, but we had a Bible study going, and we actually decided we were going to launch in a living room. But when we decided to launch in a living room, we were like day one, full production, cinema cameras, everything set up, drums, everything in the living room. And we did it 2 years ago yesterday on a January 3rd. It was my dad's birthday yesterday. That's how I remember that. But yeah, that it's been quite a journey. We just celebrated on September 26th was our first kind of worship experience open to the public in the community center here. And so we just celebrated that anniversary a few months ago now. And it has been a a wild ride. I don't know how to best describe it. Different than expected. We did things a lot differently than I had originally planned to, but it has been incredibly rewarding at the same time, and really difficult. But even on the most difficult days, there's still a sense of peace. Um, so yeah, it's been great. Been great. Difficult but great.
So you launched 2 years ago,
Yes.
effectively, from September. What did the process look like leading up to your launch? How much time were you spending on the front end building your core team and really going out and kind of I don't know, any level of like pre-promotion in the community of, hey, this is launching, or did you kind of wait until you had launched before you started plowing into that?
Yeah, so we did a lot of soft launching, and for me the story goes back even further because several years ago now, probably um, in the neighborhood of 6 or so years ago, I really felt a calling to start a church and to be a part of that. And I had grown up. I'd originally wanted to be an Air Force fighter pilot. That was my dream. That was my goal. I did the whole flying thing. Started flying when I was 13. Got my pilot's license when I was 17. Um, Air Force ROTC, ready to go. And God just completely put a stop to that plan. I still fly, still love it. But I did not succeed in Air Force ROTC, and I was very in shape but could not run. But anyway, so from there, I was always involved in ministry growing up, and I had a few opportunities for full-time ministry, and I struggled, and I really felt a calling to start a church. But there were many, many times where I flat out told God no. I said, I am
Mm.
not doing that. I'm not. My father-in-law, he's a worship pastor. Grandfather-in-law, he's a pastor. That entire side of the family is deeply rooted in ministry. And they would always ask me, what my calling to ministry looks like. And I would tell them consistently, I am not called to full-time ministry. I'm not doing full-time ministry. Not going to happen. Um, and it finally came to a point where I was really, really kind of feeling like Jonah a little bit, where it was like, I can continue to run from this, or I can finally be obedient. And we experienced a lot of church hurt along the way, and it wasn't necessarily the fault of the church. I look back now and I realize that I ultimately wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. And my wife and I found ourselves in a situation where we had been serving full time as volunteers at a church because we did the full time pay thing and it didn't work out. And we were like, you know what? Maybe if we just serve full time, for free as a volunteer, that'll be the answer. And we did that, and we ran into a situation where we were really hurt. Um, we got our first vacation in on a Sunday in years, and we were on the beach in Naples, just kind of walking down the beach at sunset. And I looked at her and I said, I think it's time for us to be obedient. What do you think about the idea of actually answering the call and starting a church now? Is now the time? And she looked at me and she said that she always knew this conversation was coming, but she just didn't know when. And it felt like it felt like just about every other door was closed, and so it was a step for us to be obedient. And so that I think that story is important because from there we had a team of people that was consistently doing ministry with us. I'm a tech and worship guy, so all of my closest circle was always tech and worship people. Um, so we had effectively a worship team. We had a tech team that was really looking to us, saying, "Hey, what is the next step here? What are we going to do?" And through many many conversations and prayer, we started a Bible study with this group of people, and that had become very good friends with us. And that Bible study kind of turned into us meeting in the living room again, full tech worship, everything. It was a little ridiculous at the time, but it was a lot of fun, a lot of learning time. And so then we started kind of getting to the root of your question. We started looking at doing, I can't remember what we called them now. Kind of like launch parties, but getting into the community, letting the people in the community know what we were about. Um, and we had definitely some barbecues with the community, and we were super gung ho. We were excited. We were expecting like hundreds of people to show up to these parties, and that did not happen. But I'll tell you what, we had a lot of really really good team building time and fun time together, and man, it was a good time looking back on it. So We actually also ran into a situation where my plan was to kind of start by doing nights of worship, these big nights of worship parties once a month in our community, and that also did not end up happening. We had like one of them, and there was just such a push behind the team. The team wanted to get back into church. They wanted to get into a building. They wanted to get the flow going, and so we ended up launching in September with basically just the core team. And God took us through the season of really laying a foundation of what that core team was. And we had a couple people leave. We had several people join, and it hasn't been until the end of really 22 that we started to see a major uptick in leadership, a major uptick in people joining. And then it became a situation of, we've been laying this foundation for a year and a half, and we've been, seeing where God's taking it. Now the people are coming. Are we ready? Are we ready for that? So that's kind of the season we're in now. Maybe a long-winded answer to your question, but yeah.
No, that's great. And so you guys are in a community center now?
Yeah, we are. And such a blessing, man. It's a big ballroom. There's a stage. It's a stage, but everything's blank, which I love because we can be creative. It's very inexpensive. We like doing lights and haze, and so getting a haze machine in a community center is really, really difficult, but we made it work out. So yeah, it's been great, and we get kicked out during voting, so we get to be creative whenever it's voting time. But it's awesome.
So when you were doing full-time volunteering, and you were even other ministry jobs, what did that look like for you? Like, what was your role? You mentioned being like a worship and tech guy. Did you find yourself kind of gravitating towards those realms?
Yeah, for sure. I started right out of college. I was a worship leader in college, and kind of part-time, and then was a part of a church launch part-time, really, really part-time, very minimal part-time. And right out of college, and from there I got hired as a full-time technical director. And my tech side came from, I got the opportunity to tour with Student Life Camp, first as a production assistant and then as a front of house engineer. And so that was kind of the tech side for me. Got really interested, and that's where my company JH kind of came from, was that original church launch and seeing the needs that churches have. But basically, ended up being a full-time technical director at a church, which is very, very good friends of ours now, and it was great. I mean, we did a lot of. It was a very much a learning season for me. I was kind of like the rip the Band-Aid off kind of person. So we came in or I say we, my wife and I, but I came in and immediately walls painted black, ripping all the lights down, pulling all the network cable out of the building, redoing SDI. I mean, just like I was probably really difficult to deal with back then. But for me, where at the time as the church was growing, I had a really strong interest in getting into the pastoral side of it. But I also was not really mature enough or old enough to know how to express that. And so there became a little bit of conflict because I was really interested in the pastoral leadership side. But at the same time, where the church was in their season, they needed a technical director that was just a technical director, And so for me, and that's where that internal conflict of, am I answering God's call kind of started to come out. We ended up leaving that church. Still were very, very good friends with them, and they helped our business along the way. But we left there and actually ended up, we're down here in Port St. Lucie. We ended up serving at Elevation Melbourne for a while, and loved it. Loved the church. But we were waking up at 3:30 in the morning in Port St. Lucie for a 5:30 a.m. call time. Learned a lot about leadership, learned a lot about, I know Shep was there, great guy. But it just became practically very difficult for us to be there at 5:30 in the morning. And then we had a church in our area that, they had been around for 10 years. They were really struggling, and they needed some help in the worship technical department. So we ended up coming back into town and serving at a church here, and that's where we were serving as a full-time volunteer.
Okay.
and we did that for about almost 3 years. We were there, and yeah, a lot of a lot of difficult days, a lot of serving. Now there, I was on the I was called the worship experience director, and I was on the executive staff. So I was not a pastor. I was still very much declining a calling to full time ministry. Um, but I was sitting at the table, and we were making big leadership decisions at the church, and then I was kind of working another full time job at the same time and trying to get my business going too. So
Um, yeah, and it's interesting. I think I think a lot of times, like the full time ministry ministry, I, God calls us all to our own the aspects of ministry that He needs us in.
yeah,
And your process, like you went through an interesting process to get to where God had ultimately called you, and that process is, I think in the process there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of frustration, but then it's ultimately at the end of that process when you're like, oh, this all makes sense now. Like God was
right,
preparing me for what He had actually called me to, and some of it, it's like you look at Jonah, like you mentioned Jonah, and you see how he was on the ship and he went through this whole thing with the fish, and it's like I can only imagine how nasty that was. But then how much more grateful he was to be on dry land and to actually go fulfill the calling that he had dreaded before. Like he went into that calling motivated because he had just survived being in the belly of a fish,
right,
and just completely changed his perspective and his mindset on tackling what God had called him to do. When before it's like, I don't want to do that. Like that sounds awful. I'm not going there.
yeah,
And I know, like, even like in my own life, where I am now and feeling like God's equipped me to help churches. Before I would be like, I don't want to go out on my own and start my own thing. That sounds awful. Like,
yeah,
not getting a paycheck every 2 weeks, and no, having a
exactly,
dollar amount assigned to it and knowing what it is. Like, ugh, that sounds terrible. But God calls us where He calls us, and ultimately, like, we might put up a fight, but He uses that fight and that process of to create that frustration and better equip us for our calling ultimately.
yeah.
Um,
And what's funny too is I think like there's definitely days where I'm like, man, I really want to know the rest of the Jonah story because I feel like it kind of just stops, and it stops at a moment where where Jonah's almost angry with God, saying like, because God's He spares the Ninevites, and it's like, I knew you were going to do this anyway. If you were going to do this, why did you need me to come here and do this anyway? And there's definitely days where it's challenging, and it's like okay, God, I'm doing what you called me to do, but there's still financial stresses, there's still marital stresses, there's still just people in general stresses, and it's like, God, what's I'm here, but now what? And there's days like that too, and it's just funny because there's days where I'm like, it'd be really cool if we had like the rest of the John story. It kind of just
hmm
stops there, but yeah,
Yeah, it's funny you say that because it's like I feel that too, and I hadn't really made that correlation. But it's like, God, I'm here. I'm doing what I feel like you've called me to do. But this isn't the easiest thing in the world either, and it's not always. Um, yeah, I mean, God's going to do what God's going to do regardless of our willingness to serve. He's
yeah,
got His ways of accomplishing His end goal, but we won't get into predestination versus.
yeah,
We'll save that for a different day. That's another hour long topic.
absolutely.
Um, so coming from a background of like worship and tech, do you find yourself getting distracted by some of the technical elements now? Is there any sort of tension that you feel in that?
Yeah, yeah, I do. I kind of feel bad for our tech team because they have to deal with me being the pastor and me being like the technical director too. But but yeah, the it's challenging because I'm the first one in the door just with the tech team. We show up at 6:45 in the morning, and then usually I bring a change of clothes usually because by the time we're done setting up, I'm totally nasty and um, but yeah, a lot of times it's especially if we're running late on something. We open the doors at 9:45 for 10 a.m. worship experience, and we there'll be times where it's like 9:47 and I'm still running around, working through an issue with the tech team. Haven't changed yet, haven't had any decompression time whatsoever yet. Um, so there's definitely times where it's distracting pre-service. And then certainly during the worship experience too, like I'm a big believer in, the connection between what we call worship, right? The singing and the music and everything, and then the sermon. And I'm a big believer in that concept, of course, that worship is way more than just singing. It includes the word, and then it continues on into the week. So I love the transition between worship and sermon and making that kind of glue together. And that's been a learning process for our team because they, where they grew up, that really doesn't happen. It's musical worship, it stops and then it goes into the sermon. For me, I really like pulling that together. And so there will be times where, there's tension, like I'm trying to move in a direction and they're not really catching that direction yet. And, so we'll have moments like that. We've been praying for a keyboard player for months now, and I've started to get into this habit, and it's a very unhealthy habit, but it has worked. But I've kind of been like, God, I know you're not going to do this, but it would be really great if you did it. So we've been praying for a keyboard player, and we just had a keyboard player join our team, Ray, and he played at Christmas Eve, and it was funny because we were transitioning from worship to sermon, and we were able to do stuff that we weren't previously able to do because we had a keyboard player, a really good keyboard player for that too. And so I found myself listening to the keyboard like, man, that's cool, he's doing a great job there, and kind of not really processing what I was saying at the same time. So that was kind of a fun challenge on Christmas Eve for me. But yeah, definitely some distractions, and I try really, really hard, especially when, like, once the actual word begins, like I try really hard not to point out any of those distractions, because I know what it's like on the technical side for the pastor to be like, hey, turn that light off or turn that on or do something like that. But I definitely notice those things. And then it's also interesting too, because we're still in a growth season where we might have an issue with streaming, or we might have an issue like that. And now the team is trying to communicate with me that we're having an issue while I'm trying to preach, expecting me to somehow tell them what to do to fix it while I'm up there. So, but it's all good times and learning experiences too.
Yeah. So you and I first connected. I mean, we've been Facebook friends for a while. I think from when you were in Melbourne at Elevation is probably when that happened.
Yeah.
Because I was at Elevation, and I did notice Shep being a mutual friend. And I'm like, oh, Shep, how he's come full circle.
Yeah.
But when you were posting about some of your JAH stuff, and it's unique products and great price points that are wonderful for especially churches, ministries that are trying to find the best bang for their buck. But I'm curious, how long did JAH come before you launched the church, or is that something you kind of spun up once you were there and realized there was a need through what you were doing?
Yeah, so the idea of JAH started in 2013. I was drawing speaker cabinets, and I was that annoying kid when I was touring with Student Life. I was that annoying kid that there's a guy named Crash, we called him, that came and taught us everything to prepare us for the road, and I had so many questions for him that eventually he told me, like, hey man, my job is to teach you this, like, stop asking those kind of questions. But I was so fascinated by it, started drawing speaker cabinets. My grandfather and I actually started building cabinets in the garage. We found out very quickly that was not practical to scale in any kind of way. So yeah, a lot of the planning and dreaming started in 2013. We had an opportunity with a local church to step in and help them out, I guess, more as an integrator. I found out very quickly I do not want to be an integrator, but we had an opportunity to help a church in 2017, and so that's kind of when our sales started, was with that church. And then, ironically, just about at the same time, we were working on a plan for the church that I was the technical director at. We had since left the church, but maintained a good relationship, and so we did their entire install at the same time. And by then, we'd already established a product line that we felt like was it a good place in the market? And we've grown since then, and I'm still forever grateful for those two opportunities because we learned so much in those two opportunities, and worked through the issues with the product, and allowed us to kind of get to our version 2s, version 3s that we're at now. But yeah, so started in 13 by dreaming. 2017 was really getting into sales. At the same time, I was working as a flight instructor, and so I was working as a flight instructor, serving at the church, and then also trying to figure out how to run my own company. And one day, I was really really stressed about it because a flight instructor job is a stressful job in general. But I was talking to my friend one day in the car, and I was like, man, it'd be great if I can just figure out how to make the company work financially so that I can do that and serve the church, and then I can fly for fun. And he's like, well, do it. And in that moment, I was like, well, I guess that's one option, just to do it. So, and another thing, sorry, go ahead, Brian.
I was gonna say, I think there's always that threshold. It's like, is it a dream or is it a goal? And once you make it a goal and you can actually apply actionable steps to get there. Continue what you're saying.
Yeah, I had just another thing that I don't know if this is good advice or bad advice, but I really found myself negotiating with God, if I'm allowed to say that out loud. Like I found myself saying, okay, God, I'll do ministry. If that's what you want me to do, I'll do it. But you got to make this thing work so that I can support my family financially and make it happen. And it's kind of funny because I look back on that and I think about how ridiculous that is. Because as soon as I start submitting my will to His, then things really start happening. And but that was kind of always my prayer, was like, hey God, I pray that you would make this work. And really, the company has always been an extension of ministry. Number one, it was created to help churches, but number two, it has been been the fuel, especially financially, to be able to go and launch the church years later now with Redefine. And it also puts us in a unique situation too, because the company has allowed for, we have a full line array rig, we have lights, we're able to do that. And so when we started the church, it was a little bit of an unfair advantage in the technical side because we came in with a 20-foot trailer full of equipment on day one. That we need to test stuff. I don't want to put anything in anybody's church that hasn't set on our platform first from a testing standpoint. And so we're always, anything new that's coming out in the world of JAH ends up on our platform first. We run through the test and work out kinks first. But yeah, it's been and that's been difficult too. So since then, I don't flight instruct anymore. I get to fly for fun every now and then. But just working on growing the business and then also of course doing ministry now. And it's gotten to the point now where ministry has consumed so much time that we're hiring people to handle things on the business side because I don't have the time that I used to anymore, which I think is a blessing. Something that started as God, make this work so that I can do ministry, to now, well, you got me doing so much ministry now that we got to get other people involved over here.
Yeah, that's a cool story. I mean, it's cool how God built that, and I don't think it's wrong to negotiate with God, however you want to say it, because I mean, it's like if we are united in our calling, and if we've come to realize that calling, I think our hearts align in that regard. God put that desire in your heart to build this company to benefit the church, and so he helps see it through, which is really cool.
And what an interesting, just from a business perspective, it's such an interesting industry, and this. I mean, the particularly on the manufacturing side, it's so challenging because there's so many big names, great names out there that you're an underdog for a very 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 long time, and if you ever make it past that stage. And so that's been an interesting thing, but a cool challenge at the same time of trying to develop a product that is good for the church, that's going to be a good fit for the church, because ultimately if you build something that's less expensive but it doesn't last as long, you run into the same kind of problem, right? And so that's been an interesting goal, but such a challenging thing in this industry to go out and, I guess, compete with some of these really really big names out there that have been around for a long time, And so there's certainly growing pains involved in that too.
Yeah, and a lot of it's just competing for attention.
Right.
Making sure that that your brand, your offerings are put out there enough that people even realize it exists. And that's where I'm at with my company. It's like um, I haven't done any marketing, I haven't done any promotion. It's all been like word of mouth, which has been great. But yeah, I don't want to be something where I market it and it looks cool or whatever, and that's why people want it, like that they want to work with me because I'm awesome, like clearly. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I'm coming to realize I do have a responsibility to make it known what I have to offer that can help people and can help churches. Because if they don't even know that I exist and what I'm doing is an option, and this approach to integration and system design is an option, then they're just going to go with what's familiar and what's always in front of them. So it's like trying to make people aware of the fact that there is an alternative. Like, yes, you can buy, Chauvet or Martin or Clay Packy or whatever. Like, those are great lights. But
Right.
there's another option that's going to do what the church needs it to do. It just doesn't have that name printed on it.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
so once people realize, like, oh, I can still have, this really bold worship experience, and we can have the lights, and we can, we can encompass all the senses and draw people in this worship experience without spending $20,000 on a moving light fixture.
Yeah.
Then the wheels start turning. It's like it'll almost just promote itself, and you don't have to sell it on all the features. You have to sell it on the fact that there's another way of doing things. It's a disruption. It's an industry disruption.
Right.
I was watching this really cheesy, terrible Netflix movie the other day with my wife, and I'm not even gonna. I don't know the name of it. I'm not gonna recommend it because it was awful.
Okay.
But it was a bunch of people that called themselves the Disruptors, and it was, again, cheesy and terrible, but it's like they were all disrupting different industries by being, social media influencers in different areas. Um, One was like for man's rights. It was terrible. It was like, this is awful. Um, so I'm not encouraging that, but the idea is like disruptors. Yeah, they're disrupting industries, and that's kind of what I've set out to do, and what JAH. It's like you don't want to overturn a whole industry, but you do want people to know there's other options besides what the industry promotes. And the industry's been come to known as, like, it's really expensive. The cost of entry is
Right.
really high. To have high quality stuff, you got to have high level budgets, and that's not the case anymore. And I think the sooner churches and ministries realize that, especially, as inflation continues to go up and the cost of goods continues to go up, $10,000 doesn't get you what it used to, but
Right.
you
For
can
sure.
still have high quality for the price point you're used to. Just have to look in a different place.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
so and I think that's where you and I align, because the technology aspect. Um, but it's also, I mean, it's cool to see how that has helped pave the way for, financially, for your ministry, and for you to feel free to go and do what God's called you to do. How long were you with student life?
So I did 2 years, 2 summers with Student Life. First as a production assistant, and that was really interesting because I've always been like a, I don't know, bull in a china shop kind of person, or like I said, rip the band-aid off. But I was really excited, and I felt like I had a lot to bring to the table, and quickly found out that there's a process. And so I remember when I applied for Student Life, I applied for like every production position and the whole that was available, and I realized how ridiculous that was now. But yeah, I went first as a production assistant, and so my job was basically, the I was handing microphones, to people. But really, when it came to load in, I was setting up just about the entire PA. So the A1 would go in, spec the room, tell us what angles we were setting at, and then it was my job basically to fly the PA, run all the cables, set up the stage, and just learned a lot about technology at that point. But then also you know, saw some things that I felt like, well, this could be done a little easier, or maybe this should be rethought, kind of thing. Um, and then year two, I had the opportunity to be the front of house engineer, which was kind of a different ball game, and really really cool opportunity to meet a lot of cool people, a lot of really talented people. Um, that was one thing I loved about student life is like when they hired, they didn't just hire camp counselors, for example, which is just a different model. They hired front of house engineers, they hired lighting directors, they hired people that were professional in the production industry, which allowed a lot of opportunity for growth. And then the team that they brought in to train us and to prepare us, they're the ones that Student Life got all the equipment from, and so they brought us in and trained us how to set everything up and use it all, and just a really cool system there.
And it sounds like, a good experience just being exposed to as you were through most of your career per se leading up to this, just being exposed to ministry and all
Yeah,
of your life, with your family.
absolutely, yeah.
Always been in ministry. So now, as you've got this church and you guys have been going for 2 years, do you find, like with JAH and the church, and you already said you're looking to kind of separate more from JAH and kind of build that team up more to be sustainable without you. Um, do you find that your bills are more or less paid by JAH or the church, or a split as far as how you're putting food on the table and keeping a roof over your head?
Um, so that's a good question. It's right now. Uh, Frankly, my wife pays most of our bills at the moment because she's got the government job in here, and really, that's so important. Is of course, there's always times of disagreement, but for the most part, we're really on the same page about where God has called us to for this ministry, and that has been so helpful because it's been a season which has been challenging for me, honestly, as as the husband of the house of I've got these dreams and I've got this calling, but in order for this to happen, we really need you to go to work and to do that full time on the side, as well as all of the other responsibilities she has here with the church. So there's that side, but yeah, at first it was overwhelmingly JAH, of course. It's kind of transitioned a little bit. It's the you know the industry is a commission-based industry, and so basically there are times when it feels very 50-50, and then there are certainly times where JH still kind of takes over. Um, but the uniqueness of the situation is this. Like, I feel like there's a because when we launched, we immediately got plugged in with other people that were launching at the same time, and different pastors going through different. Everybody has different circumstances, but um, people, I think there's a stigma about. We talked about this a little bit, Brian, but I think there's a stigma to the whole bivocational ministry thing,
Right.
and I think that really is it's a mistake to think like that. I think that the the income that is provided through JAH allows me to do the ministry that I do. And so it's very much an extension of the ministry. It's all part of the same pot. It's all part of the same ministry that's happening. And similarly, just like we talked about, when you think about worship, you really shouldn't separate the songs from the sermon from the rest of the week, because worship is so much more than that. Ministry is so much more than just being the pastor at the church on Sunday morning. And so that ministry, and that's kind of how I've connected it is the ministry, what I'm doing with JH is part of the same ministry that's happening at the church. And so for me, it's all a blessing. It's not like, well, I must not be succeeding on the church side because I still have to, be supported over here financially with this. And at the same time, it's allowed us to do things that other church plants flat out cannot do financially, because so much of that financial burden goes into supporting the pastor
Mm.
initially, that you're limited in what you can do with outreach. You're certainly limited in what you can do with technology because of the expense there. And I feel like what we've been allowed to do, and God's kind of provided some opportunities for me to be humbled on this kind of theory a little bit over the last year. But my concept has always been, if I can get paid last, there's so much more that the church can do moving forward, even including providing opportunities for other people to grow and to support them financially. So if all of the finances in the beginning are going to me as the pastor to support me, it very much limits what I'm able to do to support the team that is ultimately a part of growing the church. So, so I think that the opportunity to be bivocational, especially in this season, is a blessing for sure, because it's allowed us to do things that would not otherwise be possible. Um, and ultimately, we're relying on God on both sides of it. So we're relying on God financially on the church side, and we're certainly relying on God financially on the business side. So, and He can do whatever He wants with it.
Yeah, he brought you here. He brought you into it. He'll see you through it.
That's right. Yeah, maybe not the way I want to. There's it's kind of goes back to the whole manna in the wilderness thing. Like there's always enough for today, but not necessarily enough for tomorrow. So, but He always comes through, and so that's you know, it's been certainly part of the process.
I think that's a really good a good connection to make. You know, the manna, the Israelites, it was a daily thing. If they tried to keep it, God was like, "No, can't do that. You gotta have faith. You gotta depend on me every day."
Yeah, absolutely.
And so many times, it's like, man, I would love to have 6 figures in the bank account, just sitting there waiting for that rainy day. But
right,
God's got His plan. He's got His manna. That's a good reminder. Well, I mean, I appreciate your openness and willingness to share your heart and where God has you in your situation. And I think that's it's huge because it is one of those things where a lot of churches, like you said, the pastors, and it's not wrong for them to pull their salary, only from the church, but
right,
it can be limiting if that's their mindset that they have to only do that.
Right. And especially, not to interrupt, but especially if they feel like they're not succeeding because they can't do that.
Yeah.
This must not be where God wants me because He's not providing the finances to do it. I think that there's a lot of missed opportunity there,
No, that's really good. That's really good. Yeah, and you can draw parallels there with, anytime someone starts their own endeavor and it's not supposed to be easy. But when God's involved, like we can have faith that it's going to be okay.
Right.
It's going to be
Right.
more than okay. It's going to be rewarding, whether it's in this life or the next. We have our reward waiting for us. Well, I mean, anything else? I mean, any aspiring church planners, people out there, maybe they're starting off on their journey, planning a church, launching a church, whether it's in sunny Florida or rainy North Carolina. You have any advice you would want to leave them with?
Man, that's a tough question.
Very broad question.
Yeah, a lot of the really cliche stuff comes to mind, right? Keep
Oh
going,
yeah.
don't give up. Yeah, I mean man, it's I feel like things very rarely go the way you expect them to, and but that doesn't mean that God's not working. And in fact, what I've found is it to be, quite the opposite. It's like the moment I think that, hey, this is the right, this is the way we need to do this. This is the way it's going to happen. God steps in and says, hey, don't forget who's actually in control here. And yeah, so I think to just stay encouraged, and then also seek ways to stay encouraged too. Like, I think that was a struggle for me, was like trying to, again, knowing that we were doing what God was calling us to do, and just kind of, not sitting back, because we were always working hard. It's not that. It's a difficult thing to describe, but I found that we need to be, looking for what God is doing at the same time. We need to be looking for points of celebration. We need to be looking for things to be encouraged by, because it's easy to step back and just start focusing on all the things that are not working, that you kind of lose sight of what God actually is doing.
Mm.
And it's incredible, everything from the big things to the little things. Like we've seen God, I grew up like, I went and saw Brandon Lake the other night, and he talked about this really cool analogy of like, he grew up in the Southern Baptist Church with the seatbelt on real tight. And I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church with the seatbelt on real tight, And it's like there's some good in the seatbelt for sure, but at the same time, like I feel like God's been saying you got to loosen the seatbelt a little bit. And what I mean by that is like we've seen God doing miracles in our church. You know, one of our members' families that started, you know, and I'm not saying this really even has anything to do with our church, but one of our foundational, you know, members and actually our CFO, their family, our CFO's wife was diagnosed with stage 4 uterine cancer um, at the end of 2021, coming into Christmas time, and she received a terminal diagnosis. And anyway, it was a difficult situation. As a young pastor, we had just started a church. This family is looking to me, you know, and they, you know, they've got a lot more years than I do, and you know, they're looking to me as a pastor, and immediately we start the church and we have this horrible situation going on, and I don't know how to deal with it. And if I can be super transparent, I'm thinking like, man, the first funeral I'm ever going to have to do as a pastor is going to end up being with, you know, our CFO's wife. Like what a challenging situation going into this. And it was just it was a difficult season, but seriously and miraculously through the grace of God, we found out, I think summer of 2022, that she received, you know, no evidence of disease. She went through chemo. They told her there was nothing that they could do, and she is cancer free. And so praise the Lord, the war is won. The battle's not over yet because she's still in recovery and still has difficult days. But man, there's stories like that just continue on. You know, my grandfather, he had complete kidney failure, was going to be on dialysis for the rest of his life. I was sitting in the hospital with him. He's a part of our church. I'm his pastor. He's also my grandfather, you know, and I'm praying, Lord, like, give me the right words here to say, because I want to say everything's going to be okay, but everybody's telling me it's not. And so he started dialysis, and 3 months later, completely off of dialysis. The doctor said, you know, we don't know how to explain it, but he's not on dialysis anymore. You know, and just to grab on to like, and those are the big things, but there's little things every day. And just grab onto those things, look for those things, you know, find encouragement in those things. And I don't know, I guess that's what I would say, you know, to people who are trying to figure out this process, you know.
Yeah, I think you hit it. That's some of the encouragement people need. But even like you said, go out and seek encouragement. It's not always just gonna come to you. But there's encouraging things we can find in our day-to-day life. We just have to have the right mindset. And
Absolutely.
I think having that mindset of we have everything we need. We have more than enough. God's going to provide his manna. And yeah, don't worry about that aspect. Just worry about doing what you're called to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Man.
thank you for joining us. I will, in the show notes, I'll have JAH's website. I'll have some of your contact info. Instagram, yeah?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah,
all that
Instagram.
stuff. And as well as Redefine Church, we'll link it all up and show everyone where to find you. But thank you for taking the time, for sharing your experience and sharing your heart and what God's doing down there in sunny, always beach weather, Florida.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. And I can't wait to see kind of how your business develops and what you got going on. And I don't know how much of it you shared with the world yet, so I'll let you do that. But I'm really excited from the stuff that I've heard. And I think what you're doing is exactly what is needed. So I'm excited to be a part of it in any way I can. And man, can't wait to see what it looks like.
Well, thank you. Thanks for your encouragement and your support. I certainly appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll see you soon.
All right, see ya.